sharing tips and tools and tricks is a big passion of mine because you can't do it alone. But I want to know how you became a neuroscientist and a mind expert. I think it's so fascinating. Was it your own personal journey that led you to become an expert in this field?
It's actually a fascination from a young girl. I was fascinated with the brain, and I had planned to become a neurosurgeon. I got into med school, and I did 2 years of med school. And I basically, in my degree, I was exposed to medicine and I was exposed to neuroscience. And I basically did a different kind of degree, which was a combination of medicine, neuroscience, more psychology, neuropsychology, communication pathology. It was a really interesting combination of degrees where there actually was a test degree. I was sort of part of a test group where they put two different degrees together that would normally take 7 years, and they put them into 4 years, and they worked us 12 hours a day for 7 days a
Oh
week.
my
So
gosh.
when I was doing it, I thought, why have I done this to myself? But in retrospect, it was the best thing because it launched me into my master's, PhD, and all the research I've since been doing for the last 38 years, because I was completely and utterly fascinated with the brain. But the brain didn't satisfy my craving because I wanted to understand the mind. And the mind is not the same as the brain. And they're two different things, even
So
though
how would you describe
it
in
is.
layman's terms the brain versus the mind?
Well, the brain is the physical substance. So for those of you that are listening, I'm holding up the brain in the skull, and I've got another model, another model I'm holding up of the brain and the body. And basically, what you can see, and if you're a listener, you can just look at your own body. That is the physical part of us. So the brain's physical. It's only 1 to 10% of who we are as a human. So the rest is mind. So we are 90 to 99% mind. So mind is, in the most simple way of understanding it, is you and I are alive having this conversation, but if we were dead, we wouldn't be able to have this conversation.
Right.
But because we're alive, we are able to. So the difference between the mind and the brain is our aliveness, because a dead brain can't do anything. A dead body can't do anything. But here we're alive, and our mind is what's giving the action, the aliveness to the brain and the body. So the brain and the body respond, and you need the two because the mind needs the brain to be able to build memories into and to express ourselves. So it's that relationship between the two, and then the brain and body feed back into the mind. But the mind's the dominant force, and the mind drives everything. Mind is first cause. Like I say in my book, and I don't know if you saw that quote in the book Cleaning Up a Mental Mess, the most recent one. You can go 3 weeks without food, 3 days without water, 3 minutes without oxygen, but you don't even go 3 seconds without using your mind. As soon as your mind stops, you're no longer there. So if we understand that it's the primary force, it's always working. You wake up with your mind, you go to bed with your mind, you dream with your mind, you eat with your mind, you do exercise with your mind. You're using your mind now to us to have this conversation, and the listeners and the viewers. So in other words, your mind is always in action. So my underlying premise that I have been researching for 38 years now, and that I teach and write in all my books and did in my clinical practice for 25 years, is that we need to understand what mind is. And that's been a huge neglect in the last 40 years. We focus so much on the neurophysiology and the neuroscience, which is important, but to the exclusion of mind. And that's been to humanity's detriment. And so we have given birth to a narrative of mental health that is very, very damaging. And we see that with a lot of huge studies, and I talk about some of them in the book, where people are actually dying 8 to 25 years younger from preventable lifestyle issues because we're not focusing enough on mind. We're focusing just on physical. We've subsumed the whole mental element into the physical, and you can't do that. You can't try and shove 90% into the 10% or the 99 into the 10 and just ignore the 99. That's who you are. It's your
So it's
life.
like I get what you're saying because I have been on medication for a very long time and I tried to get off of it. I'm one of those people that I have to be on it. I've tried other things, but I have to, that is only one piece of the puzzle. I have to do so many other things in conjunction with the medication for it to actually work like properly.
Mhm. Absolutely. Well, the thing with medication is that you get medication for. I'm not anti-medication when it comes to diabetes and heart disease and whatever physical diseases of the body. Psychotropics, which is what you're probably referring to, antidepressants, anti-anxiety meds, those have these always side effects, but there's no judgment, there's no guilt or shame or condemnation, because obviously that is If it's helping you, then that's great. But what we need, what's not told, what makes me very angry in this field, is there's not enough informed consent. So a lot of the side effects, which are actually direct effects, not even side effects, should be explained. And when you try and come off and you experience these terrible
Yeah.
reactions, when you say that you're one of the people that can't, it's most likely the withdrawal, because, and then you're told that your disease is coming back, but you don't have a disease. What you have is you've got life trauma, and that life trauma is manifesting in depression and whatever the different things you're going through, which is very, very much a normal thing. Depression, anxiety, etc., they're not mental diseases, they're not brain diseases. That narrative is very, very misleading and can make us feel kind of hopeless. And the medication is a way of sort of coping with it, but we have to, as you know yourself, you said you have to work on a lot of other stuff as well. But the thing with medication is that you can't just come off it. You should be tapering off it, and they don't explain that properly. You should be, it's the microdosing should be so small that you don't even know, and then one day suddenly you're off, and it might take 5 years. But the point is, you should never just go off it, and that can create the most shocking side effects. But tapering done properly is very effective. It just is time. It takes time. It's not quick. But that's just, if you ever decided you wanted to, if any of the listeners decided they wanted to, that is an option. Tapering under medical supervision it's the only way to do it effectively.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So your book, Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess, I'm still reading it, in the process of reading it. You talk about mind management. What is mind management?
Oh, that's actually an excellent question, and a great place to link into the whole mind-brain connection that we started off with around the first question. Basically, mind management is managing the mind that's always working. So like you said yourself, that you have to do a lot of other stuff to help manage your mind and to actually get the medication working. And that's so true. There's research shows that to make anything work in our life, we have to get ourselves working through issues. Now, when we talk about working through issues, that's mind management. So your mind is how you process life. Like right now, let's go to the most basic example. People are listening to us and we are having a discussion about mental health. So the concept is mental health, and we are using our minds to talk about this. We're using our minds to process it. So essentially what's happening is, if I take this model of the body, and for those of you that are listening, just look at your own body and imagine that there's a cloud around your body, and that cloud is like a gravitational field. It's the same thing that keeps us seated. We're not floating because of gravity. We're in gravitational fields. We've all learned about that at school, and we hear about that and we know about that. But what we may not know about is that each of us has a gravitational field around and through our body. So essentially, that's, if someone's dead, you don't have that. That's what we pick up, like when you do an EKG on the heart, or you do a QEEG in the brain, which is the technology I use. We're seeing that life. So essentially, mind management is managing this driving force that keeps us alive. And it's the mind on a psychological level, is our ability to think, feel, and choose. And on a physics level, it is this gravitational field thing. But right now, as you're listening to me and the listeners are listening, it is our discussion is the experience, and your mind is processing what I'm saying through the auditory waves and electromagnetic sound waves. So your mind does this kind of processing thing, pushes it through the brain, and then the brain responds electrically, chemically, neurochemically, genetically, and on a quantum level. And it actually is building what I am saying and what we're discussing into the brain as little protein trees. So I'm holding up a little green tree.
Oh, this is so cute.
I know, it's so nice to have visuals because it makes it super easy, and you'll see where I'm going with this as we're talking. So what we're discussing now, this is going into the brain, into everyone's brain, as a thought tree, and a thought is therefore the product of mind, and our mind is always working. So mind keeps making products, and where are these built? Into the brain. So basically, right now, you are changing your brain, and that's neuroplasticity. So with your mind, as you're listening and thinking, feeling, and choosing, you are building that moves through the brain, and then there's this relationship between the mind and the physical, and the result is that a physical structure is built, and then everything I'm saying is in these branches. But like this tree has roots in the pot, and all trees and have got roots. So same thing with the thought tree, it has roots. So the words that I'm saying in our conversation are the root part. The branches are your interpretation of what I'm saying. So that's different for every person. So this whole tree is a thought, and you see there's lots of branches, and I'm saying lots of stuff, and you asking me lots of questions. So by the end of our discussion, there'll be at least maybe 1,000, maybe 2,000 little roots in this pot, because that's the amount of concepts that we've discussed. And then you would have grown to about around about 1,000 to 2,000 little branches, which are the interpretation of what we've said. Now, this then becomes what you use to discuss this conversation. So when you go from here and you talk about this to someone else, or you apply it, or you read my book some more, when you read the book, it'll add more stuff to this, and then so in other words, how you are behaving, what you say, what you do, how we show up as humans in life is based on what we built. So now here, that's a healthy thought. Now let's look at the opposite. Now it will make sense. There's a toxic thought. So I've got this wiry tree versus a beautiful green tree, and it's all like it's made of wire, but it gives you the idea of what happens, because in the brain, a toxic experience like a trauma would show up differently to a healthy thought, which looks like a green tree. So in the brain, they look different. The proteins are all folded in a really weird way in the brain. The chemical, the balance, everything's weird. But these things are substance. They're real. They have weight. Thoughts have weight. And because these are distorted, the toxic ones, they weigh on you. They make you feel heavy. You experience them, you experience that heaviness, because from your brain, not only are these stored in your brain as trees, but they're also stored in every cell of your body and in the gravitational fields of your mind. So every experience that you've had since in the womb till now is stored in your brain as these trees, in your body, in your body, in your DNA, and then in the gravitational field of your mind as waveforms. Now, a healthy tree would be nice, healthy waves, like think of the nice waves of the sea. But a toxic thought would be a very jagged, disturbing thought. So that's why when we recall a trauma, its overarching impression is like, oh my gosh, your whole body feels it, your mind, you're overwhelmed with the emotions and the details and the facts and the interpretation and the imagery. And it's just because all these memories are coming up. When you
And you
recall,
can actually see it if you do a scan.
you can see the
Yeah.
disturbance in the brain. You can actually see the difference. You can't see detail, you can't read someone's mind, but what you can see is a
Right.
disturbance on an fMRI, for example. We'd see an area where the oxygen levels and blood levels are very are dropping. In certain types of scanning, we are able to see that this is very distorted proteins, and there's a lot of inflammation. That's one of our signs of where there's damage. There'll be inflammation, because your brain sees this as a threat to your survival, like it would see a COVID virus. COVID virus is made of proteins. Thoughts are made of proteins. So this is a toxic protein. So your brain sees that, oh, that's a threat to survival. So it sends out the immune factors. So there's inflammation. So we see inflammation, we see low oxygen, we see a low blood flow. We also see an imbalance of the energy waves, which is delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma, high beta, and high gamma. And those are supposed to flow like the waves in the sea, but they're flowing maybe like a tsunami, or they're not flowing at all. So we see responses in the brain, and it can keep changing, because as you start managing, as you start recognizing that the depression that you're experiencing, or the panic, or the anxiety, or all of them, normally there's a whole bunch. It's never one alone.
Right.
If
They
you
come together. Yeah.
the anxiety, yeah, like to say one thing is it's and none of those are diseases. All of those are signals. They're warning symptoms. They're like clues. Like if you think of a detective, they see the clues and then they track what caused whatever who murdered who, or whatever, like think of Cluedo or Poirot or Sherlock Holmes or something. They look at the clues to find the origin. That's what I'm explaining to you here, is that when you have depression, anxiety, eating disorders, bipolar, schizophrenia, disassociation, extreme sadness, whatever, and the combination of the above, you are not a broken brain. You are not diseased. You do not have a neuropsychiatric brain disease. What you have is a very normal response to adverse circumstances. And you coped as best you could in the situation. Like you said, you had a lot of trauma. So trauma is a toxic experience. The root part, if you remember, I said the roots are the source. So as I'm speaking now, that's the root part. So whatever you experience, the trauma would have become is the roots of this toxic tree. And it could be a lot. If there's a lot of trauma, there's lots and
Yeah.
lots of roots and associated trees, and it can be a whole network, it can be a whole little mini forest of those things, those traumas. And then that then manifests in how you see yourself. So very often, for example, sexual trauma, your thoughts, feelings, and choices about yourself, or that you're useless, or you have shame, or you have guilt, or you're not worthy, or you whatever, and that manifests as the depression, or behavioral issues, or relational issues, or all of the above, and so what we want to do is we want to become thought detectives. What I teach is a very hopeful message. The research I've done is over the last 38 years is to normalize mental health, because it's not that mental health is getting worse, it's that we're not managing it, and that's what's making it worse. People are dying 8 to 25 years younger if we don't look at the narrative. So if you come to me and I tell you you have clinical depression, I give you a tablet and I send you away, I have done you a disservice. I have invalidated you. But to validate your experience, I need to listen to your story, and I need to help you look at the clues and be a thought detective to find out, okay, from the clues, what are my emotional warning signals? What are my behavioral warning signals? What is my perspective warning signals? How am I looking at life? What are my physical warning signals in my body? Do I have lots of GI symptoms? From there, you can then track down to find the origin. And that takes time. That's daily work over cycles of 63 days.
It's a lot of reverse engineering.
It's reverse engineering. Yeah, it is. It's totally that. It's how, because I studied how thoughts are built, which are the product of mind. So, well, that's how they're built, then let's reverse engineer. So it's embrace, process, and reconceptualize in the reverse engineering process, or it's deconstruct and reconstruct. And that's a lifelong journey, because I mean, yourself from doing trauma work, is that when you find out one thing, and let's say this little part of the route, then you realize, okay, now there's another one, and now there's another one, and then you see, your eyes get open and you start seeing, and it can be really very, very hard. And that's why, the therapy and the support, this, what I teach, doesn't replace therapy, it enhances therapy. You've got to live with yourself 24/7. As I said, your mind is always working. Your mind is your aliveness. Your mind is how you experience life. So you've got to know how to mind manage. So mind management is being able to self-regulate and read those clues, read the patterns, and then manage them. The big stuff of the traumas, which you do as a sort of daily fixed routine. And then also you can, that process that you do, the neurocycle, which is what you do daily to detox the trauma over the 63 days. But you can also apply it in the moment by moment stuff. So let's say while you're working this out, these things are behavioral manifestations in your life. So let's say this is a sexual trauma and there are relational issues. So now you're working on it, which is fantastic, but you're still in life. So as the days happen, someone says something to you and it triggers, and you're still working this out. But now your mind management is that you recognize the trigger, you recognize your reaction, and you recognize, okay, I am not depression. I am depressed because of, or I am not just triggered because I'm brain dead, or brain diseased, which is hopeless. It makes you feel terrible about yourself. It is, you're normal, but you've been triggered because you've had trauma. So we've got to see ourselves as being normal, and we've got to see those situations, the triggers, the heavy emotions of depression, etc., not as diseases, but as these warning signals. Embrace them as helpful messengers. Celebrate them, because when you say, okay, I'm feeling depressed today, really depressed. When I say celebrate it, I'm not saying celebrate the depression and get more depressed. I'm saying acknowledge it and celebrate that you can acknowledge, because in the acknowledgement, you now weaken it. Because we know from neuroscience that the minute you become aware of something, these protein bonds that are holding the tree together become weak. They can start melting, and you can start doing the reverse engineering process. But if I suppress it, they get stronger. And then then it's much harder to reprocess. So to see depression as a helpful messenger completely changes the picture.
The perspective of it. Yeah.
Because what you're told at the moment in the current narrative is there's something wrong with you. That's what your doctors would have told you, that make you feel like you've got some brain illness, like you're mentally ill. It makes you feel bad about yourself. I'm telling you, you're not mentally ill, but which is, I believe, invalidating. I'm validating that you've been through trauma, and that trauma's effect, it's adverse, and you have every right to feel depression, anxiety, panic, etc., because of what you've gone through. And your validation needs to come from, it's okay to feel that, but let's help you process through that so that you can move forward and not get stuck in it. And then you can change how the past plays out into your future. That's basically mind management.
And you mentioned neurocycling.
Yes.
Okay, so to recode and rewire your brain, you need to mind manage and neurocycle.
So the system of mind management. So I can tell you mind management, and you can say, well, what is that? Mind management has at its core, at its heart, is the concept of the neurocycle, which I developed 38 years in a very therapeutic environment for people with severe sexual trauma, war trauma, traumatic brain injuries, head injuries, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, sports injuries, learning disabilities, dementias, Parkinson's, all that kind of stuff. Then I applied it into, saw how it was working so well there. So then I applied it with in different areas, government, education, day to day, human, just me being alive. So it's got different levels, therapeutic, and then the basic, how do I use it for me as a human just to get through life? So that version's in this book. Simple how to mind management. So mind manage. So the neurocycle teaches you how to manage your mind. Because with our mind, we have a messy mind and we have a wise mind. Every human at their core has wisdom. Now we're using it right now. We're having a discussion about heavy stuff. We
Right.
are digging deep, we're introspecting, we're exploring, we're discussing, we're having a back and forth discussion, we're learning. That's wise mind operating. Let's say someone comes to you, your best friend, and tells you something, and then you give them this great advice, and they say, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Thanks for giving me that perspective. That's your wise mind. Every human has that. It's all about love and survival. And so anything that threatens that, you're going to try and fix naturally. So, like this would threaten it. It's any kind of toxic issue. So, with the neurocycle, what you're doing is you have a very scientific system that I've developed over these 38 years. It's not a technique, it doesn't replace therapy, it doesn't replace CBT and ACT and whatever you want to do. All the wonderful techniques out there, it simply enhances those. So it teaches you, what do I do with myself? I'm sitting here, I can't sleep, I'm ruminating, I'm feeling a panic attack coming on, this depression's weighing me down, I don't want to live, whatever. What do I do with my mind in that moment? So the neurocycle concept and system teaches you how to, in a very systematic, objective, distanced way, manage that process, even almost as though you step out of yourself and you step into what I call the multiple perspective advantage. And we've got this phenomenal ability of humans to stand outside of ourselves. And that's what you do. You imagine that imagine a pilot and a co-pilot. In a plane, you always have the pilot, you always have the co-pilot. The pilot is the messy mind, the experimental mind, the mind that's in the front line of the war of life, experiencing, reacting. It's fast, it's quick, it's making decisions. Not always, some brilliant, some not so good. The co-pilot always has the right answer, always can see the future, the past, always has the best perspective. That's the wise mind. Now that's how we operate all the time. So see yourself as wise mind, messy mind, as you approach the neurocycle. And so now you're dealing with, let's say that there's major depression in your life. So now you say, okay, I'm going to stand back and observe myself. The messy mind is in the midst of this depression. That depression, I am not depression. I'm feeling depression because of. So now let me be a thought detective, messy mind working with wise mind, or pilot working with a co-pilot, and let's start investigating this. So here we now bring back our little toxic tree. Here's that you're flying over in your plane over this forest, and imagine a massive forest. This is the easiest way to understand neurocycling. And that forest represents your mind. Every experience you've ever had from a certain age in the womb to what you're at now, most of it's filled with green trees, but they're going to be large clusters of
Mine are
the.
not green. Mine are not green trees. Mine are those. And I did a brain scan when I was in high school, and my amygdalas were like non-existent, like
The amygdala
almost.
is the section that's perceptual library. So it's a part of your brain that's the perceptual library. So it doesn't do anything, it responds. And its job is to be like a library, and it holds the perceptions of what you've experienced. The actual, these are in the outside of the brain, in the
Okay.
sort of outer part of the brain, and they link to the pathways, link it to the amygdala. So when this comes up, then it connects and activates that library book and pulls out the library book, and that library book says all the bad stuff. See, and that all the perceptions of, and they're not necessarily facts, but they are how you view the
Right.
situation. They're your perceptions. So the amygdala gets overactive. So what we'll see on a brain scan or on a QEEG, we'll see high beta. We'll see it look like a tsunami in that area. That's literally what will look like. And then that reduces the connection to the front of the brain. And then the front of the brain loses a lot of energy, gets all out of balance, a lot of blood, less blood, and then that means that we tend to have bad decision making, become reactive, and that kind of thing. So in any one brain, we're going to always have some green trees, but there'll be clusters of dark. And I know that it feels like you're living in this But there will always be these. But here's the good news. In the middle, you've got this green strip that can never be impacted by these because it's your wise mind. And that's what you want to tap into. And that's what the neurocycle is basically doing. So it's literally you in the plane. You look at you're flying over this forest and you see this. And we want to push it down. We want to numb it. It's just so painful, but that's not going to make it go away. It's like a weed. If you chop the head off, it's just not going to go away. It's going to keep growing back. So we have to do that reverse engineering, deconstruction, reconstruction thing. So imagine landing your plane, but you're now very objective. It's you and the pilot and the co-pilot, and you're standing back and you're observing this. You're not standing under this with all the apples hitting you on the head and knocking you out. You're standing back and you start going through a very methodological, systematic process daily for limited amounts of time each day, 15 to 45 minutes over 21 days. And then the other 42 days to make up 63 days, you only spend around 7 minutes a day. So it's not long time that you spend each day, but it's over a longer period, because that's how long it's going to take for the brain to take all the strong energy out of this. Because these that make you feel like this is your brain is just like this, these have had so much energy because whatever you think about the most is growing. And that has exactly, imagine a forest and there's this huge big tree like this and it's blowing in the wind and it's strong and it's catching your attention. It's dominating. This is teeny and little. It's not getting any help. It's not very strong. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we find these, deconstruct these, get them weak, build these. And if you look at that, and I'm holding up the green one, and if you look deep inside here, Yola, what you'll see, and I've done it like this, you can see, can you see the top there? It's light green.
Yes.
And then okay. So when we talk about reconceptualization, which takes 21 days, which takes the 15 to 45 minutes, doing the neurocycle for 15 to 45 minutes each day, you will create a thought, because thoughts are real. And what you're doing is you're controlling the process by doing the neurocycle, landing your plane at the tree, doing the 5 steps, which I'll go through in a moment. You are the end product is you're going to build a thought, because there's always a product of this work. Okay. And the green is your story. It's the trauma. But it's now in a controlled way. It's controlled by what you want out of your life. How do you want your trauma to play out into your future? How do you want it? It can't go away. It's happened. But you can change out its impact on your future. So you can decide, okay, it's stuffing up my relationships. I don't want that. I want a relationship. That's the goal that I'm working towards. I'm going to cut. And there's all kinds of things you can do too in this process of reconceptualization, which is where the action of the 5 steps comes in, to convert it into this point where you empower to control it and you empower to recognize the triggers. Now, when after 21 days, this incredible process has happened, you built these new thought trees that are now healthy, you're still feeling, you've gone from I am depression to I feel depressed because of, so you know why, but now it's still small. It's got to compete with other trees and other thoughts in your brain. So you now have to spend the extra 42 days making this strong growth, big, lots of energy, so that it can move into your conscious mind, become a habit that then impacts your behavior change. And that's a process. And you might find after the first 63 days, you only identify one part, and then you have to go into another 63 and another 63. People aren't told about the time. So very often therapy can just go on and on and on and on and on. And you make breakthroughs, but you don't spend enough time stabilizing breakthroughs. So it feels like you're going back to square one all the time. And so many, if therapy is not done well, so many people get stuck in the point of, I know what I'm supposed to do, but these are too small to impact your behavior. And it's so frustrating, because you know what should be happening, you know what you want, but it's not manifesting. You've got to do that extra 42 days and this multiple cycles to get it to manifest. So that's why I wanted to bring into people's hands this understanding, plus the tool of the neurocycle that you can use with therapy. So you can give your therapist even more guidance to say, hey, listen, I need to practice getting this to manifest. Help me do that. You can then be more clear on kind of what you want and how you feel you're getting stuck. Or it enhances. I have therapists around the world using the system with their patients, and it's helping, it's enhancing the therapeutic process, but it's giving you control. And that's one of the biggest things in healing, is when you've been traumatized, control has been taken away from you, which type of trauma it is. And that's the most, and you've been invalidated as a person. And these are just broad sweeping statements, but they're general statements that you feel like your uniqueness, you have been destroyed. And it's that can make you feel like your entire life is this. And so that's what's so important, is to rebuild that belief in yourself and that identity in yourself. And that's where this process that I've developed comes in along with therapy. I do believe very strongly in therapy and coaching and counseling, but also finding the right therapist. So if you're with a therapist and it's not growing, okay,
Yes, I think when I first started therapy, I went through 5 until I found
well,
the right one.
good for you that you actually kept pursuing and persisting, because that's very important. I had someone I was interviewing the other day who went through, terrible trauma for years, sexual trauma, and it had 13 years of bad therapy. That's just like,
That's
so
just adding to, yeah,
yeah, it just was adding more, fuel to the fire.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. My first therapist made me play with Barbie dolls when I was 16
Oh
and
gosh.
color. And she told me that this is such a long story, but basically she told me that I wasn't like popular, and that's why I got bullied. But it all goes back to a deeper issue, but
Of course.
because of my childhood trauma. Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly, right? And so I remember seeing red and wanting to just actually like jump on her and like hurt her. And I was like, oh my goodness, what am I feeling? I was like, I have to stop seeing her.
Very good trigger. Yeah.
Exactly. And a lot of people will say like therapy triggered me even more, it made me worse, or and because of exactly what you're saying. So the
Yeah.
5 steps is under neurocycling or mind
Yes, yes.
management?
So so mind management is the concept, and the neuroscience
Yes.
is the system of mind
The
management.
system of, okay, got it.
You go, and it teaches you self-regulation. And the concept is that basically you can self-regulate the whole time you're awake, which is what we're not told. And it's a skill. The other thing is it's a skill to be developed. Like you can't just start. If I gave you a violin, are you a violin player? Okay, so if I gave you a violin, you couldn't play it. But if I sent you for lessons and you went for lessons every day, you would learn to be a violin player, maybe even a brilliant one. That's the principle. I can give you the neurocycle, and fortunately, you'll learn to use a neurocycle quicker than you'll learn to play the violin. But you have to practice using it, because these things don't go away overnight. There's no quick fix. It's going, but the difference is here. This is a very scientific, systematic way that you are telling your mind to change your brain. So you're rewiring your neural circuitry using your mind correctly. And that's the key. So, and so every step has been worked out meticulously to change energy patterns in the brain, get the alpha, delta, beta, gamma, blood flow, oxygen, the amygdala working with the hippocampus, working with so it's been designed to make stuff happen that you don't have to even think about, but that's how it's been so tested. So basically, when you use it, it's very generic. So you can adapt it. You use the 5 steps, but you can bring in whatever stories you need and whatever ways you need to make it work for you. But essentially, the point is that once you land your plane, you want to gather awareness. So gathering awareness is all in flying the plane, seeing the smoke signal of depression, let's say, for example, the clue, the warning signal, the symptom, landing the plane and starting to now, okay, here's my basket. I'm going to start picking the apples. So this is a helpful, this, I'm not scared of it. I'm not scared of the depression. It's a helpful message. That's the shift. When you say that, what I've just described, you make 1,400 neurophysiological responses work for you, not against you, which is powerful. You make your whole stress axis work against you. You build resilience in your brain. So you might still be crying and traumatized, but there's a shift happening. Okay. And then you start gathering awareness in detail. So you start picking the apple. So you and the co-pilot in this kind of distance, stand back, stand outside of yourself kind of situation. And you use things like you. Okay, Yola, you pick which apple you want today. And you pick one apple, and that's an emotional warning signal. And you put that in your basket. So that's maybe depression. And a physical sore stomach, a behavioral snappy, a physical, what about perspective? Life sucks. That's all I can deal with today. That's totally fine. Then you look at your apples and you start reflecting, which is the second step. And that's asking, answering, and discussing and exploring. And then that's a deep process. Then you go to the 2 writing steps, which the one is getting your brain on paper using a system I've developed that pulls the 2 sides of the brain together, digs deep and gets to this core, like over the 21 days. It's unreal. It's called the metacog. And you do that, you write in the form of a metacog. And I teach you how to do it in the book. And I have an app. So the app's like called the Neurocycle app. And that's like me giving you therapy. I walk you through all of this. So I'm literally taking you through the process. And then the 4th step is to sort out what you've written, because the first writing step is like kind of everything all over the place. The second writing step, which is step number 4, is to go and sort out and find the patterns, the triggers, the antidotes, the reconceptualizations. And then the first step is a little action step that you end the session, like you're literally giving yourself a session, you end that session. And then it's kind of a deconstruction, not deconstruction, it's a decompression kind of thing where you hang on to something very positive that you've learned for that day. And it may just be, I am not shame. And you just got to keep saying that to yourself all day long, but you don't allow yourself to go back to that. Tomorrow you'll start again. And so it's very disciplined, very systematic, and over time it starts changing all the systems of the brain. So in the book, in the first half, there's a whole lot of pictures of inside the brain of what's actually happening. And as you do that, the more you do it, the easier it becomes. So as you saw in the second half of the book, I explain those 5 steps with a table, the stories. I give lots of examples. I mean, I've got a podcast called Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess, where I teach this stuff on my all my social
Yeah,
media.
your IGTVs and reels are amazing. Yeah. No,
But
I want, we have so many questions, but I know we might not get to it today. So we'll have to do a part 2 because I feel like we barely scratched the
we've just
surface.
scratched the surface, absolutely.
And I'm going to make sure that we also put this up as a YouTube video, so that way people can see the tree example, because I think that is so vital.
Yes.
To see the examples of the trees and the wires.
It makes it real, because now you know,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to life through this, but I can do this. And you know, when you've got things to hang on to, and this is real, this is science, this is what I've studied for 38 years, and it gives you control. Okay, I can control that. Yes, you can. You know, that's like, oh, I can it's hard, it's not going to be easy, but the work is there, the evidence is there. I show with my work, and I showed in the images, that as you are going through the 21 days, you're going to feel a little bit worse before you get better. It's called the treatment effect. You may feel awful, and that's why it's important to have a support system, but you'll get through that. The difference is that you'll feel more anxious, but you'll know why. It's not out of control. You don't, so it's a different type of anxiety. It's more of a sadness that, oh my gosh, look what happened to me. When you start recalling stuff, should never have happened. That should never have been like that. So it's that kind of sadness. So that's where I build into the book as well, preparation for the brain, like the meditation. I know you wanted to ask me about that. Meditation just starts the process, but it's not enough on its own. On its own, it's pretty dangerous, because it can be,
okay, we'll have to get into that with part 2.
absolutely. So we can do that, because unfortunately, as
I
you
know. Real quick, where can people find you on Instagram, your podcast, your book? Where can they find all of that?
Dr. Caroline Leaf is my Instagram handle and all my social media handles. And as you know, from Instagram, you can go everywhere. But my webpage is drleaf.com. My podcast is Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess, the same name as the book. I have lots of books. This is my most recent, available wherever books are sold, and also at our web store on drleaf.com. And
amazing. Amazing. Well, we will get to the questions and more a little bit deeper on part 2, but thank you so much for coming on. I'm like, I think my brain is just like, I feel it tingling, actually, like a real sensation of like a good tingling.
But that means it's growing. It's
growing. Yeah. From just listening right now. So it's amazing. I hope everyone's brain tingles. Like this is a real thing. Like I was like, I'm feeling like it's like a brain massage. That's
beautiful.
Yes.
Beautiful. Wonderful.
So I wish I had found you when I was a teenager in my early 20s, but I'm glad, and hopefully so many new people can find you. And I'm only I just got the book, so I'm just started it today, but I'm going to work through it, and because you can always unpack different roots.
Oh, absolutely.
And this year, yeah, I'm sure there's other roots that have popped up this year for so many of us. Well, thank you